Good morning. We are smooth 98.1 FM. You're welcome inside the Freshly Press this morning. Let's get started this morning with the headlines. My guest is ready, and I know you, of course, you're ready for us to get into the headlines this morning. But once again, you can catch a live stream of this conversation on youtube.com/smooth 981 FM Lagos. Search for us on YouTube and then give us a follow. Leave your comments there. We're sure to drop by there and pick up the comments. But you can as well do us send us a WhatsApp message on to 0809 444 0981. We can also get the messages coming across. That's it. Good morning, Chibuzor. Where's the apple?
Good morning, Omas. Good morning, Lagos. It's a good day. It's a good day to be here again. Restful day, actually, but good.
A restful one, right? So that makes you see that it's a possible one to have a 3 working day week, right? From what we see now.
It's possible to have a 3 working. It's possible to have it from time to time. I don't think it
Okay,
should be
so
the
let's
norm,
pick
but
up the papers now. Let's go
I
on to
think
Daily
yes, we have
Trust newspaper where the headline here says ALGON, that's the Association of Local Government of Nigeria, seeks 4-year tenure for local government officials. If the governors is good for them, if it is good for the president, it is good for the House of Assembly members at the state level and at the federal level. If it is good for the senator, why wouldn't it also be sweet for those as a local government chairman? Speak to us, Chibuzor.
So this comment was made by the chairman of national president of ALGON, who is Alhaji Aminu, when he was interviewed by newsmen in Lafia in Nasarawa State, and he spoke at the need for the local government chairman to have a 4-year tenure where they would be able to roll out their programs and do what they need about the current tenure, which is short in comparison and does not allow them to deliver the program. So I think his current comment obviously comes at a good time, and it's a bit of alignment in what has been said in recent times by the president, and a lot of talk about being given the local government some level of independence or complete independence, not even some level. Constitutionally, the local government is a separate and distinct third arm of government. But as long as I've lived, and especially in recent times, I think it was better even in the previous dispensations. Since we've entered the Fourth Republic, it's basically treated as an appendage of the state governments. And the state governors, for whatever reasons, and I suspect most of this financial, have chosen to treat them as appendages where they would not only distribute money when they feel they need or how much they feel, set up their own LCDAs where they can split the monies and share it accordingly, and add and remove LG chairmen as they ought to within the tenure by making them interim until you have an interim chairman that lasts the entire time that an elected chairman should sit in. So we have all sorts of misnomers that tend to happen right now. And ALGON are taking advantage of the current the current mood in town to actually push their case that a 4-year tenure should be applicable to them, same way it's applicable to other arms of the other levels of government. And I think it just makes sense that we should have an extended, at least at the very least, a 4-year period for local government. The other thing, obviously, that raises for me is that the local governments also need to embrace the responsibilities that they have in full. The same thing that we expect from the state governments, that we should move from this post sharing thing that we do on that FAQ, where everybody just sits down at the end of the month and awaits and expects an amount of money to come through it. Local governments should be able to reap off their resources, should be able to drive internally generated revenue, should be able to be the government that the people see. And when they start doing that, they also start feeling the responsibility they have to the individual. They start reaching and campaigning to their people. At the moment, a lot of people do. Because of a lot of people do have some relationship with local government because they know that is where they can access government funds, especially in our politically leaded states. But they need to do far more than they are doing now. I don't think they are doing enough. And I do hope that we're able to sort out this entire thing about independence, because then probably we would now be able to hold them accountable and we need to see how far they can really go.
So Chibuzor, before we rest this headline where they're seeking, he who wants, to whom much is given, much is also expected. But look at it from this angle. Their current tenure is 3 years. Are we on the same? So if it's 3 years, but really, what's it? It's just a 1 year that's missing from what the tenure they're asking for. So what really would they really do in the first place that they can't do in 3 years, that 1 year would make a difference?
So in comparative terms, you've actually made a very good point that the difference between 3 and 4 years is basically very limited. I do think if you actually have programs and kind of political spaces that we do have on ground, if you do actually have plans for actual programs to be driven, I think the only thing that the concerns I have with 3 years is that the governors currently use them, that lacuna, that gap between the third and the fourth year, where the governor would serve, and the 8 years to actually make all the changes of bringing in interims. The elections are managed by the state electoral commission, so the governors do weigh a lot of influence there because they select and they pick whoever runs those things. And you typically see an instance where and it's not different from most of the elections in Nigeria, where the governors do influence heavily on the local government chair, because the governments also are thinking, and the party leaders and the governors are thinking about the next elections where these governors will have to sit. So whoever is driving the local, if they have the support of local government by imposing or influencing whichever leadership comes into those places, then when their election cycle also does come up also, they have less worries to deal with. So I think also for that, that is one of the reasons why I feel that, having the local government's chairman also having a 4-year tenure, that it reduces a lot of that influence. But hey, a lot of things have been proposed in Nigerians that work in theory, that don't work on the practical field. So we'll see how that goes.
So Chibuzo, let's even imagine a 4 year that's granted now. Let's see them doing 4 years, a tenure. But what's the impact on the polity in terms of every 4 years, all the levels of governance, except for judiciary now, that's the organ now. But let's look at the 3 tiers of government. There is bound to be election at the end of 4 years. Wouldn't that be too much and so much instability, politically speaking, that there need to be at least one balance? Let's finish up with the other phase, the other 2 tiers, and then we can get down to you to do yours.
Unfortunately, because of the way we do run our political system and the way we run our elections, it would appear that it would bring some level of instability, a lot of things that come with elections typically should not be happening today. Our elections should be better organized. Sorting out who is going to run the elections for each of the levels, from the local government to the state, is one concern, because I do know there's a lot of jostle about should the federal INEC run the local government elections, or should it remain at the state level? If we were actually doing what we needed to do, where the heads of each of these arms were completely independent, for instance, and the people trusted that we're independent, we would not be having these issues. There will be no need for us to be even discussing that the INEC should run the local government elections. They would remain in the hands of the states electoral commissions, because we know or will trust that whoever is heading and whoever works underneath them are independent of whatever forces that would be pushed on them, from either from the state level or even for the INEC from the federal level. Unfortunately, we have a system that is so heavily politicized that we don't have this. I think one of the things that we need to do is probably get to the point where we embrace what we have in reality, and we're now putting safeguards to manage those influences, and even get to the point where you have the people playing a larger position in actually doing this. Unfortunately, what you have in the Nigerian state today is that the people have not taken ownership of these institutions. They have been captured largely, in my opinion, by the politicians and the political class. So they run them and they manage them. Until the Nigerian people take ownership of their own institutions, we will still have these challenges. But there are a lot of reasons why Nigerian people have not taken ownership of these things, and I don't think we have enough time to cover some of these reasons now.
All right, so let's drift on now to the Vanguard newspaper, where we pick up another agency in itself in terms of ownership and how it can carry out responsibility it is saddled with. But let's see what the headline talks about as we dig into it. It says, population census too sensitive to be rushed. That's a federal commissioner being ascribed to that statement, and that's coming from the Vanguard newspaper. Lead us into the story, Chibuzor.
So I do agree that the population census is, so to start with, I will agree with his comment about the population census being too sensitive to be rushed. Why is it too sensitive to be rushed? I think that one of the challenges in Nigeria, and we spoke to it in the first thing, is that every single thing we do in this country is heavily politicized. The population census in most countries, obviously, the population census, or generally, the concept of the census is that it is used as a planning tool. While in a lot of countries and a lot of places around the world, the focus in terms of planning is in terms of economic planning. How do we plan for our economic growth? How do we plan for our social spaces? How do we plan for population? How do we plan for schools? How much money do we need to be able to sustain a GDP or a living income or a living standards of living in the country? Unfortunately, a lot of our focus in terms of population numbers in Nigeria is in terms of resource allocation, because somehow at some point we built into this entire FAC and the resource formula, we built it into how funds are allocated, we built it into how some political classes are taken. So you do see a lot of political influence and a lot of interest when we want to do censuses. And a lot of this have come even pre-independence. A lot of this came from pre-independence. A lot of Nigerians still argue today that the numbers that we have pre-independence and which we've taken into our current economics, into our current definition of Nigeria, and which has had a big influence in our elections and political decisions, are incorrect. So, every election cycle for, if you stay long enough in Nigeria, where you see the early results from the various parts of the country, especially when it comes to the presidential elections. And you do know that you are waiting for what we call the Kardashians, the KKK states coming up, because they have the high chunks of numbers, and they typically determine, apart from the third rule, they typically determine the destination where the president goes. So even for the politicians, they know who to go and meet, and they know the alliances to build. It's just a mathematical formula. Anybody is, at the end of the day, that's what politics is. So those numbers are based on the supposed decisions and are based on the supposed electoral numbers, which are tied to obviously population census. Because obviously, if you say that I have 20 million in my state and I say that on my voters register I have a subset of that, I'm not going to argue. But if I have 1 million in my state and I see 5 million in the voters register, there is a question that needs to be answered. So we've tied a lot to a lot of political decisions. We need to decide and we need to make that shift of mindset to what it actually should do for us, which is help us plan properly, help us know how many people do we need to actually plan for. And that comes from the government's being genuine to itself in two things: in what direction they want to go in terms of providing resources for the people, in terms of providing a better life for the people. And they need to stand by that. Already, we were supposed to have done this census, I think it was last year. It was supposed to be after the general elections, and the government had already sent some. If I recall, I think about the last the former minister had said that we need about 869 billion to run the census. So the government had already committed about 295 billion. So even if now that we're going back to the entire matter, is what happened to those funds? Have we the planning, the efforts that were done with
there
those
were even
funds
some. There had been some test run even. There had been some test run even.
Yeah, they had done some
mapping out
test
some
runs.
areas, and people have gone on ground.
So you have done a lot of committing. You have committed a lot of funds to the ground. You have done a lot of planning. You have done a lot of purchasing. Are we still going to have, even when you now start talking about when you want to do the census? Because we do need to have a census. We do need to have it. Let's remove all the political underlinings and all the technical issues. These funds that we had earmarked and spent at the end as at 2023, have we lost those funds? Those questions need to be answered. But we're not going to answer them. It's something that we need to be very, critical about. I remember one of I know I'm taking up a bit of time, but I remember I think at the last census, I had my kid brother was he was serving there, and he was one of those people that was asked to, just coppers were asked to lead some of the effort. And he got back and he told me various stories about how, he regaled me with stories about how in a particular state where he was serving, there were a lot of offers, monetary offers for them to basically cook up numbers, because the feeling there was that the more numbers they had, the more funds would come, the more they would able funds would come allocation wise, the more they would have to use, the more they could push forward in terms of electoral voting and all that. We need to change that direction. We need to build something that people will understand what is the basis of this. I'm not even talking about other things like the cultural issues where people don't want to be counted, or you cannot count particular people, where you have to get assumed numbers. We have to find ways around it. But what we need to first agree on, and the head of the census committee needs to needs to come out, and the population commission, federal commissioner in this case, and his boss need to come out and meet with the government and agree on when they want to have this next census. We need to agree that we need to have a census. The reason given at the end of the last regime was that they wanted to hand it over they handed it over to the next regime to be able to make a decision on it. But I think that decision needs to be taken now. Already we are grappling with the fact where we have GDP numbers and people are complaining about standards of living, because one, there's the elephant in the room about our increasing and our growing population, and we keep estimating how much our population is really. How do you plan when you don't know how many people you have to cater for? So we need to sort this problem out, and quickly too.
Now, one begins to wonder now, the hanging question in the air now, blowing in the wind now, becomes, if the census is too sensitive to be rushed, should it now take forever to be conducted? That's the question. Don't rush me. Then how soon are you likely to conduct a census? Cast back in the 64-year history of the country, from the 60s after independence, there was one before the general election back in the days that also culminated in political issues. Then back in the day, there was the other one by the General Babangida regime, who also had the census was held then. Then there was this one you talked about in 2006 or 2005, thereabout, during the Obasanjo era. And then here we are still for dragging in 60 years. So you say we should not rush census. But let's go over now to the next story waiting, and it's health-related, Chibuzor. And this next one is coming from the Punch newspaper. Cholera spread. Fear of school outbreak rises as pupils resume. Chibuzor.
Okay, so I can speak for those in Lagos. A lot of us in Lagos who have now various WhatsApp groups and in various discussion groups. I think it was the last week started receiving this message about the cholera outbreak across the state, and we also got on the news channels. We also heard that it wasn't just about the state; it was also across the country. And obviously, it's a big cause of concern. Even for the adults, we've heard that some have lost their lives from their. There is a big cause of concern. Obviously, kids have been on breaks. Largely, some of them have been on break because of the holidays and would expect to resume across the country tomorrow, in a lot of instances. So there's a big cause of concern. Unlike adults who are a bit more, who obviously with the given time and given knowledge and experience are able to take decisions independently of their own. With kids, you have a bit more concern, especially the younger kids, in schools and in places where they have to go and get some education. They are exposed to various things, mixing with other classmates, mixing with the environment, and cholera is a food and waterborne disease. So it's a big concern for a lot of parents who have obviously, when the schools resume tomorrow, I do expect a lot of parents to be giving their kids additional information, ensuring that whatever water they are going to consume is taken from home, trying to limit how much food they ingest from outside the homes, and ensuring that whatever they consume actually is to some level safe. But given our current state in the country, how easy is it for that? I know we talk a lot about these students, but also if you look at the larger homes and the larger places that people live in, why do we have a cholera outbreak today in Nigeria? Yes, there is in Lagos, or there's some talk about some particular water source that has been contaminated, and where investigations were going on as at last week. We've not heard if they've been able to, go drill down to where the originating source is. But the truth is that if you look at around our environments, we are not living in the cleanest of environments. Even across some of the schools, across some of the areas where the schools are located. I have walked around some of the schools in Lagos, for instance, and I wonder how public schools are located in those areas. but the schools and the students and the people and their health conditions are not separate from the living conditions that we have to live in across the state. A lot of these things there are a lot of agencies that are responsible for planning, a lot of agencies that are responsible for building and giving building allocations. How are they doing the work they need to do? A lot of places there are a lot of agencies responsible for the environment, for food, for food preparation, for protection, for things like that. But you do see a lot of things that baffle the eye. I think one of the things, and I will keep on saying it for Nigeria and Nigerians, is that we have not accepted that we have to live by a particular standard of life. So we accept and we live with everything. Once we get to that point, and you see a bit of that in a country like Rwanda, where they've gotten to the point where, you know what, we are within Africa, but this is the standard we want to live on, and we want to enforce that standard. Once you get to that point, we'll take everything, because everything is systemic, everything feeds into the others. If you allow someone to build a house that takes 20 people and you allow them to put 2 bathrooms in that house and no source of water into that building, what do you expect in the long run? If you allow people to be able to cook and sell food in unhygienic places where the gutter is stale, what do you expect? You know, I think we've just been fortunate that we have very few outbreaks of these diseases. So we take it as, you know, what we are doing is right. But I do hope at some point, while the various agencies try to sort out this issue, this current issue, that we would have a reset and look at the bigger picture. How do we systemically stop some of these things? So I would ask a lot of parents to be extra careful. You know, teach your children about what is happening, educate them, and make sure that they are given, at least they have their own independent sources of water. They do exercise some level of hygiene. They wash their hands. You know, push on the schools, especially where you can. I know some of the public schools do try. One of the outputs of COVID was that we had some water sources in a lot of the public schools that were installed because of COVID. I do know a lot of them have been allowed to fall, to the side, but we need to get these things working back again. We need to build it as a habit, not just as a one-off. When we have this kind of
so let's pick up. Let's get a few messages in, and then we'll pick up the next headline. I've got Ajayi Olonilua this morning, and he says local government, being the third tier of government, should also enjoy the same 4-year tenure like the state and federal government. It's just as well as the federal government is seeking complete autonomy for the local government, so it just fits in time. All of this chorus would go properly now. That's what Ajayi Olonilua is saying. And Dan Okudwa, the barrister, says, as schools are about to resume, the Lagos state government and proprietors of schools should put in measures to stem the spread of cholera outbreak ravaging the state. Children are more vulnerable to the spread, and that's a word of caution out there to the authority and school owners to please make sure they are vigilant as the children get back to school. Well, let's see what the president's itinerary will be looking like, even though it's a public holiday, but then let's see if he has plans for any visits today. So that would be able to find out if we grab the Punch newspaper. No, not the Punch now. Let's see. Okay, well, yeah, that's the Punch newspaper. No, the Daily Trust newspaper, I beg your pardon. Now, this one says, Tinubu off to South Africa for Cyril Ramaphosa's inauguration, from the Daily Trust newspaper.
So this is.
Would he be flying business or flying the presidential jet? You might know, Chibuzor.
The Nigerian president does not fly business. Nigerians, even one of the challenges we have, you just raised a very interesting conversation, which I don't think we can cater for. But one of the challenges about Nigerians and cutting costs in Nigeria is this idea of class and substance and what we should be doing and not doing. The Nigerian president will, when he can, as long as there's a first class seat on the plane, he will fly in first class, or whatever class that is superior to the most superior class. That is the thought process of the average Nigerian, and that is why they aspire for particular offices. So I don't know if he's going with the presidential jet, or if he's, they are hiring a plane, but I do expect that he'll probably be the only one on that plane that is retinue, and it typically has a large enough retinue. I don't know if they are keeping to the numbers that they proposed the last time, trying to cut costs, but the president does have a large enough retinue. So he's going to, why is he going to South Africa? South Africa had their elections in recent times, and the parliament, at the end of the elections, obviously, what you have in South Africa, you don't have a direct election for the president of South Africa. What you do have is that the parties that lead in the, when the elections are done for the members of parliament, and the parliament will sit and pick a leader, typically head of the party. So what has happened in this case is that the previous president, who is Cyril Ramaphosa, has been re-elected by the parliament. In this instance, on this particular election, the ANC lost their grip on the House, and they've, on the parliament, they've had less seats than before. So the president has had to, the administration basically is a coalition administration. It has a coalition that consists of other parties, the DA, the Democratic Alliance, which is the major opposition, and some other parties within it. The president basically called out for a coalition government based on the results of the election. So that's what is happening. So South Africans have opened a new chapter, or about to open a new chapter in their country. And our president will be joining other leaders, expectedly, who would be at the inauguration. And so the president is flying out. He sent his congratulations and he's flying out on Tuesday, which was yesterday. Yeah, today. He's flying out today to Pretoria for the inauguration. That's basically what this story is saying. But hey, congratulations to South Africans, and we do hope that other countries in Africa do make these cycles a tradition of their own, a regular tradition, and not just the cycles, but also start to demand more from their leaders and expect one also invest more into the processes that bring out these leaders at all levels.
Well, when presidents attend inauguration of their brother presidents or sister presidents, when they're about to be sworn in at days like it will be on Wednesday, do they come back home with any like peer review, like to say, you know what, we attended, this is what we see, and this is what we should take home? Or it's just to be part of the photo ops and then they are back again, knowing that South Africa, they are older than us in terms of the journey, being 30 years on broken democracy since 1994?
So I really don't know, it's a very interesting question that you've posed, but I really don't know how, what takeaways most of these guys will go. To be fair to them, these kind of trips are typically very short trips, unless they build in working visits afterwards, which I think is highly unlikely given the fact that South Africans will be focused largely on, the government will be focused largely on trying to settle down, even though he was the same president you had in the previous tenure, but he has a coalition to work with now. He has to pass laws through coalition, and anybody who has had the privilege to watch, some of the proceedings of the South African Parliament, it's not like our own. They are quite, they are quite aggressive, and they are quite deliberate about a lot of things they demand for. I think it's quite similar to what you see in the British parliamentary system. So you see a lot of that. So I don't think President Ramaphosa would have some time to start sharing tips. But I do feel that a lot of things to learn. I hope that what we learn from it is not how pretty the swearing ceremony is, and try and plan one of the bigger statue where we are getting sworn in next time. But we actually do look for things that are actually of value, like flying into the airport and seeing how lovely the airport is, and seeing how can MMA or how can our international airports in Lagos or in Abuja or in Kano be of this standard? How many people are coming into it? How quickly things happen? But unfortunately, because of they probably get VIP treatment and get sworn in, moved in through the airport quickly, they would not get to observe some of these efficiencies and bring them back home. So, the president's on a good trip. He should enjoy his visit to South Africa. He get some rest if he can on his flights, and come back and get back to work.
All right, so that's the good place to put it. Safe trip for the president and his those who go with him, and as they go to Pretoria for the inauguration. But let's see a message from Gilbert Musa. Has a message from Festac, and he says, on the outbreak of cholera, like Chibuzor said, we have to create ideal standard of living in Nigeria. We should not settle for half measures. And it goes back into memory lane. During the Yakubu Gowon's era, we had health officers that check local canteen for standard hygiene levels. Where are the health officers today? If you ask me, Musa, I would ask
No
Chibuzor.
idea. No
All
idea.
right. We'll leave it here, Chibuzor. I want to say thank you so much for your time today, for being part of the conversation. Have a great
Thank you
rest.
very much.
Tomorrow is back to the grind.
Yes, definitely. Have a lovely time. Thank you, Lagos.
And thanks to you for tuning in. I'll be taking you next into the grapevine where you find out what your faves have been up to. Stay tuned. We're Smooth 98.1 FM.
Bye.